The first place that I'm definitely most equipped to talk about, where I've spent the most time in Honduras, is a region in northern Honduras that's notorious for state violence, organized criminal violence, and also fights of landless peasant groups and environmentalists. That cocktail of dispossession, violence, state violence, organized crime, and that's the Bajo Aguan Valley out on northeastern Honduras on the coast. You drive out in either direction when you're driving into the valley, you come in, and this enormous, beautiful valley that goes for like 40 miles in either direction with these jagged, serrated mountain ranges on either side. But it's perfectly flat like an ocean, and it looks like it's covered in like this absurdly even Velcro, right? And you get close and you realize that this is this sprawling ocean of just straight African palm, a massive palm tree that ever since the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, pushed by the World Bank, has become one of the most common crops throughout the poor global south, right? So you, in the morning, again, this surreal, bizarre beauty, you'll see in the light there, you'll see all these men with these long metal poles and a machete-like thing fixed to the end, or like a saw fixed to the end. And you'll see them hacking away in this like sweaty morning sunlight, right? And these big mounds falling down, and oftentimes a lot of the men will have scars from where these spines accidentally hit their hands as they were falling down, because these things are so huge, right? As the world, with the evolution of capitalism, shifted more towards processed goods and processed foods, right? One of the easiest ways to make that, and one of the plants that easily creates the raw material used for all of this, whether it's Cheetos and chips, whether it's shampoo, whether it's soap, whether it's sometimes biofuels, plastic, all of it is African palm. The World Bank, which some listeners may know, but if not, it's worth saying, has faced immense controversy for deciding to support some very violent actors in the global south. They said, we are going to help set up the infrastructure for African palm all around the world, including Honduras, including the Aguan Valley. They said, we're going to give people the tools they need, we're going to give them the agricultural, the seeds, the equipment, money too, to make sure that we can set up African palm, because this is the future. And in a dark way, it was. The oligarchy in Honduras, they decide, no, we don't want these peasant cooperatives just producing a little bit of palm oil. We are going to take over and we are going to produce a massive amount, because they wanted to get rich. It's very well established, even though they would contest this if they listened to this, right? That they have connections to organized crime. Because this is an area where all the cocaine coming from South America, flying out from Venezuela and from Colombia, those planes land in this region very often on these same African palm plantations. Because when you get on them, you realize that they have to keep like open roads and lanes that are just dirt roads between the palms. And that's the perfect place to land a plane that needs to be clandestine. They have illicit means of acquiring money and power that adds to their power even more. The same illicit means that have, seeped into the army and the police and have kind of corrupted the entire legal system in much of Honduras, In one case that I have reported on, that others have reported on, I'll take one case. There's a farm, an African palm farm, way out to the east, at the far end of the valley, right where the Aguan Valley gives way to the rainforest of Mesquite. That's how far out you are. Certain palm oil corporations have been implicated in using assassins, private security operatives, paramilitaries, and soldiers to murder people who try to take away this plantation. Not only because they want their plantation, right, and they want their palm oil all to themselves, and they do it fast, efficiently, brutally, right, but they have landing strips there. We know this. We know this from a US court trial. The son of the former president, Fabio Lobo, who, according to his trial, he's now in jail for cocaine trafficking. He, along with the Honduran military, received drug planes on this plantation, right? You have, starting in this era, a systematic campaign of targeted assassinations of members of campesino groups, carried out mostly by private security companies and the Honduran military and police, right? You got US soldiers or special forces soldiers who just assume that, well, the army and the police in these countries, they're fighting the good fight against cartels. Who can question that? Cartels are bad. These guys must be good, right? So they show up, they give them weapons, money, vehicles, and they give them tactical training. And I think the US just doesn't think about it. They think, well, this is the war on drugs. Obviously, the war on drugs is good. And then you've got these guys who are getting guns and training and expertise from the most well-trained killers in the world, which, like it or not, is the US military, right? So, that's kind of the dynamic going on there. A lot of people can get tripped up really easily when they see Xiomara Castro. Because if you listen to what a politician says in their speeches, what they tell the outside, like the international media, if you're listening to that, you'd think Xiomara Castro is a socialist. In a place like the Bajo Aguan Valley, you see that actually a lot hasn't changed, right? The judicial system, all the judges are still bought off. Cocaine is still, I can say from sources that, I won't talk about on the podcast, cocaine is still going through there with official sanctioning, right? There are officials who allow cocaine to go through there still. There are still assassinations, right? There are still private militias of oligarchs running around terrorizing people. There are still police, getting money, taking money from organized crime, and also taking money from certain unnamed palm oil corporations to threaten peasant groups. The rest of the corruption is still there, just because the president changed doesn't mean this enormous country. And Honduras, is still a big place, right? Doesn't mean it changes.